this is Jim again with Simple Christianity. Today we're doing episode 4, and I'm going to talk to you today about prophecy. So we've all seen movies or maybe read fiction books that have prophecy as part of the narrative to introduce a key character or a key event, which then sets up this like cool plot twist in the narrative, right? A good example is Star Wars. Most people have watched, or at least heard, of Star Wars and the basic narrative there. And you have, the chosen one, Anakin Skywalker, born of a virgin in the Force conceives him, and then there's this prophecy about how one born of the Force is supposed to bring balance to the Force. And unfortunately his story didn't end up quite as happily as I think the prophecy may have indicated or people would have hoped. But we're familiar with prophecy, okay? And as most people know, the Bible contains prophecies, and many prophecies actually about Jesus. Depending on how you count them, you can either get to dozens, or the high count is 456 individual prophecies or different facts about Jesus, that when Jesus came to earth, that he had to fulfill or be able to account for. And like I said, depending on where your count is and how you consider that, that's a huge number. So what I want to do is I want to take some time and I want to read you a few. So forgive me for those of you who may not be Christians. You may find part of this a little bit tedious because I'm going to read from the Bible. But I think that in this case, when we read from the Bible and we take the text and we go on the subject that we're talking about, I think it's going to show us something that makes a pretty good argument for the case I'm trying to make. So I'm going to read from a few places. One is in the book of Micah. Micah was a minor prophet, the Old Testament. He wrote his book in about 700 to 735 BC. Okay, so 700 years before Jesus was born. He writes this. And I'm just going to quote you a piece of what he wrote. I'm not going to go, do the whole thing. But it says, "But as for you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, too little to be among the clans of Judah, from you one will go forth for me to be ruler in Israel. His goings forth are from long ago, from the days of eternity. Therefore he will give them up until the time when she who is in labor has borne a child. Then the remainder of his brethren will return to the sons of Israel, and he will arise and shepherd his flock in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God. And they will remain, because at the time he will be great to the ends of the earth. This one will be our peace." Okay. So I read from Micah chapter 5, verses 2, and then the very beginning of chapter 5. And so for that, you can see elements of that if you're familiar with the character and person of Jesus and the story, the life history of Jesus, then that there will sound very familiar. Let me read to you something else. This is from Psalm 22. Psalm 22 is pretty well thought to be written by King David, and King David lived about 1,000 years before Jesus came to earth. So I'm going to read to you a few portions of Psalm 22. In verse 1, and I read verse 1 because Jesus says these exact words while he's on the cross. He says, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Those exact words, word for word, on the cross. And he's referencing, so those who would have been witnesses to the crucifixion, the Jews that would have been witnesses to the crucifixion, who have been immersed in the Psalms and the historical text, which they would have been. People would have been expected to memorize a lot of things. And the way you call out which Psalm that you're trying to quote, because they didn't have numbers by them, then you would quote them by quoting that first line, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And it has a bit of a double meaning, not just a reference to the Psalm, but when we look at Psalm 22 and we check out verse 14 to 18, it says, "I am poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. My heart is like wax, it is melted within me. My strength is dried up like a potsherd, and my tongue cleaves to my jaws. And you lay me in the dust of death, For dogs have surrounded me, a band of evildoers has encompassed me. They pierced my hands and my feet. I can count all my bones. They look, they stare at me. They divide my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots. There's a few things to keep in mind, some important details when we're talking about this. Again, this was written 1,000 years before Jesus was born. And we have it saying, as quoting, they pierced my hands and my feet. Okay, and so when you say that, you have the image immediately of Jesus on the cross, crucifixion. Crucifixion didn't exist then. Okay, the Roman Empire had not existed yet, was not created yet, and so when you were looking at this mode of torture and execution, the Romans were the ones that created that, and it didn't happen. So obviously, it didn't, and that hadn't been created until after the Romans came. The Roman Empire hadn't even been born yet. So you have here a pretty interesting depiction of again, a prophecy of somebody having their hands and their feet pierced, clearly in a torturous situation, resembling that of a crucifixion. Verse 17 says, I can count all my bones. And what this is a reference is that Jesus's bones were never broken, because if your bones are broken, they could be shattered in tiny pieces, whatnot, or it could just be a clean break. But the reference that you're supposed to take away from this is that his bones were not broken. This person who we're talking about, who's speaking, right? I can count all my bones. Jesus' bones were never broken. Okay. Even in a crucifixion, it was common for the Roman guards to take a club to the knees of anybody on the cross to break their legs and assure that that person was dead. If you look up the process of the crucifixion, what it does to the human body, it'd be interesting to do that so where you understand the purpose why they did that. Okay, I'm not going to get into those details now, but Jesus never had his legs broken. Roman guard, he was already dead. And so the Roman guard had no need to break his bones. And then you look at verse 18, and it says, they divide my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots. And so what happens is, if you fast forward and you look at the crucifixion account of Jesus, you'll find that Roman guards were trying to steal Jesus' clothes, because Jesus was dressed very nicely. And so they wanted his clothes, and they were like, okay, well, I want it. Okay, well, no one wanted to tear them, because then if you tear them, then nobody got anything. Okay, so they started casting lots, or drawing like a short straw to see who could get his clothing. Okay, so it's very desirable. So when you read Micah, and then you read Psalm 22, you see some elements that can very clearly be pulled out of Jesus' life, his crucifixion. And so if you look at that, it's pretty easy to see some of the elements that are similar. But one of the objections, and normally I would obviously get to the objections later, but I think it's appropriate to talk about one of these now. One of the objections that any unbeliever or skeptic can make about prophecy is, well, any prophecy can be fulfilled if it's vague enough, okay? Or if you interpret it a certain way. And that's a fair critique, absolutely fair. I don't mean to be facetious or sarcastic in any way. That is a very fair critique. There are some prophecies of Jesus that are either very simple, that any human or most humans could have fulfilled, or they're so vague that the real meaning or interpretation behind that could have easily been made to fit any number of people. And there were several people prior to Jesus who claimed to be fulfilling this prophecy, and ultimately they didn't fulfill all of them, and the Jewish people never went along with them and followed him as that person as Messiah, because it was clear scripturally this person is not fitting the bill. They don't meet all the prophecies. Okay, but Jesus did. Now, so it's important too to account for all of the different ones, right? Number one, but also you would hope that among the prophecies, again, which there are many, depending on how you count them, there can be upwards of over 450 of them. And if you go conservatively, maybe a few dozen. Okay, I know it's a wide number, but we'll get to that here in a minute. So, but it depends on how detailed you get sometimes when you talk about somebody. See if you can guess who I'm getting ready to describe. I'm thinking of somebody. He's a man. Okay. He's already lived and died, so he's no longer with us. He's an American. Okay, he's a very important American figure. This man was a U.S. president. In fact, he was the tallest U.S. president. He was the first U.S. president to have a beard. He had a nickname that he hated. Okay, he was mostly self-taught in his education. He's the only president to have a patent under him. He was considered the U.S.'s greatest president. Let's see, he was the first Republican to be elected president. Okay, and at this point you may have a pretty good guess of who I'm talking about. If I had left off a few of those attributes, maybe not necessarily in a certain order, but if I had left off a few of them, there could have been a few people that maybe fit that bill. Okay, but as I'm going to continue, I'm going to say that his sexuality was in question. People weren't sure if he was really straight, and there's some question behind that. He was the president during the largest war on American soil. He was the president during the Civil War. And of course, at this point, I'm talking about Abraham Lincoln. Okay? So, again, if you leave out certain few of those descriptions that I made, or maybe I gave you other descriptions that weren't quite as telling, and I left certain ones out that kind of gave it away who I was talking about, you could easily say, oh, there's any number of U.S. presidents I could have been speaking about. Okay, well, it's a Republican. Okay, well that accounts for a large number of presidents. Okay, that's fine. But when I start going into all this detail and I start describing several points of information about this individual, to the point where it's like, okay, he's talking about Abe Lincoln. Okay, there's nobody else I could be describing. In fact, there is no other president of the United States that fits these descriptions before I tell you that it's Abe Lincoln. Okay, so keep that in mind. Keep that in mind as I read Isaiah 53. Now, this one's going to be a bit longer. The whole chapter, I think, bears reading. And the chapter it's not too long. It's just 12 verses. But I'm going to go ahead and read that now. So Isaiah 53 says, "Who has believed our message, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? For he grew up before him like a tender shoot, and like a root out of parched ground. He has no stately form or majesty that we would look upon him, nor appearance that we should be attracted to him. He was despised and forsaken of men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, and like one from whom men hid their face. He was despised, and we did not esteem him. Surely our griefs he himself bore, and our sorrows he carried. Yet we ourselves esteemed him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted. But he was pierced through for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The chastening for our well-being fell upon him, and by his scourging we are healed. All of us like sheep have gone astray. Each of us has turned to his own way. But the Lord has caused the iniquity of us all to fall upon him. He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. Like a lamb that is led to slaughter, and like a sheep that is silent before its shearers, so he did not open his mouth. By oppression and judgment he was taken away, and for his generation who considered that he was cut off out of the land of the living, for the transgression of my people to whom the stroke was due. His grave was assigned with wicked men, yet he was with a rich man in his death, because he had done no violence, nor was there any deceit in his mouth. But the Lord was pleased to crush him, putting him to grief. If he would render himself as a guilt offering, he will see his offspring. He will prolong his days, and the good pleasure of the Lord will prosper in his hand. As a result of the anguish of his soul, he will see it and be satisfied. By his knowledge, the righteous one, my servant, will justify the many, as he will bear their iniquities. Therefore, I will allot him a portion with the great, and he will divide the booty with the strong, because he poured out himself to death, and was numbered with the transgressors. Yet he himself bore the sin of many, and interceded for the transgressors." That was written around 700 years before Jesus was born by the prophet Isaiah. Now, No, there's no secret. Obviously, I am a Christian. I have had the privilege of leading youth groups at my church, and one exercise I pulled with my youth in one of the Sunday lessons that I taught was I pulled different portions of the Bible, New Testament and Old Testament, and read them off and had the kids try to guess what portion of the book of the Bible that something I read came from. And I had pastors' kids in my class, kids raised in the church their whole life. They've been hearing, things. These are all teenagers. Again, they've heard the Bible being talked about. They've read it themselves. They have, maybe not the whole thing, but they've read plenty of it themselves. They've had people talking to them about the Bible all their life. I read them Isaiah 53, and not one student of mine guessed that it was from the Old Testament. They all thought it was after Jesus. It was part of one of the letters that came later that was written about Jesus after the fact. And the reason that there was this confusion is because this description of Jesus is so exact, it's so precise. 700 years before Jesus was even born. Another objection that you could come, and I think that the one thing that as a skeptic, and I would have been in this same position before, the one objection you'd almost be forced to offer up is, okay, well, the Old Testament must have been modified or altered. But again, there's no evidence of this. And I would just refer you back to episode 3, where I talk about the reliability of the New Testament. Well, much the same can be said of the Old Testament. In fact, we have, and I wasn't able to get a good number on this. I looked and I saw a lot of different numbers thrown around, so I'm not sure what's accurate. So if anybody can get me an accurate number on Old Testament manuscripts that we have, I would love to hear that. Please reach out to me. But the numbers I got ranged from 10,000 to 200,000. 200,000 manuscripts of Old Testament documents and writings. I think the 200,000 more includes a lot of what would have been considered Old Testament texts of the time period that are not necessarily included in the Bible, but I'm not certain of that. So again, if anyone's able to get me an accurate number, please shoot that over to me. So you have, again, let's just use that lowest number, 10,000 examples of Old Testament texts. And even recently in the 1940s, some of you may be aware or maybe old enough to remember that in the 40s they found they're called the Dead Sea Scrolls. So in the Dead Sea they found a large number of Old Testament manuscripts, and in there was like over 200 different manuscripts, and in that they found an entire Isaiah scroll, and it matches 100% with what is in my Bible, 100%. Okay, it's not like last time when we were talking about, oh, there's 98.9, 99%, it's not that. It was word for word exactly what we can get in our Bible. Okay, obviously not in English, it's in ancient Hebrew, but again, word for word, identical to what we would today think is in that Isaiah scroll. And so you have, again, almost the exact same proof is of reliability, that no matter how far back you go, no matter how many examples you're looking at, you're still looking at almost a near identical text. Okay, and in the Isaiah scroll, you are looking at an identical text. Okay, and so you see this, and you just you're confronted, I think, with the fact that, okay, the Old Testament's reliable, New Testament's reliable. Old Testament prophesies about Jesus hundreds, if not some cases over 1,000 years before Jesus was born, and the descriptions can be eerily exact, very strangely precise. And maybe you're thinking, okay, well, anybody can fulfill one of these prophecies, or they can manufacture things. Well, some of these prophecies talk about where this person will be born, or what type of parents they will have. How do you arrange for yourself to be born in a certain city, or to be counted in a certain census in another city when you're an infant, or whose parents you're going to be under, right? There's or what city you're going to be born into. It's like there's certain things that that you cannot arrange. Okay, as best as you might be able to try. Maybe as an adult, you're looking through this and be like, I'm going to try to manufacture me as being the person that fulfills all these. Well, there's certain things that are just completely out of your control, like what other local governors are doing to try to kill you. In one example, there was, Herod, King Herod of the Jews, was determined to kill Jesus as an infant because he saw Jesus as a threat to his rule, because the Jews were expecting Jesus to come as a king to reign on earth and usher in a new era of humanity here on earth. And Jesus had other thoughts in mind. So there's certain things that are like impossible for somebody to be able to arrange. But if you take just 8 prophecies, okay, like I said, on the low end, there's dozens dozens of prophecies that relate to Jesus, and on the high end, many hundreds. But if we just take 8 prophecies and we calculate the odds of how somebody can fulfill 8 prophecies, there was a study done with over 600 different university students, believers and non-believers alike, and they had these cross-reference with an agreement from people, again, non-believers and believers, and the believers were actually trying to be very conservative in how they did that, because they didn't want their numbers to feel tainted or skewed by bias, right? So they were also very critical of what the odds would be, and the odds came out to meeting 8 prophecies that it would be 1 in 10 to the 17th power. Okay, so that's 10 followed by 17 zeros. Okay, so what are the odds of winning a 1 in 10 to the 17th power lottery, might you say? So they use this example. If you were to take silver dollars, okay, and you mark one silver dollar, maybe color it red, okay, and you cover the face of Texas with silver dollars, and you do it 2 feet high. So all of Texas, right, the second largest state as far as landmass in the U.S., you take all of Texas and you cover it 2 feet deep with silver dollars, and you take that one silver dollar and you just throw it over the back of your head and just toss it, okay? And then you put a blindfold on somebody and tell them, go and find that. Okay, you can walk as long as you want, but you can only pick up one coin blindfolded. The odds would be that they would find that one red coin by just randomly walking around, not knowing where that coin was thrown, and just with a blindfold on, being able to find that one silver dollar out of a state of Texas buried in 2 feet of silver dollars. The odds that somebody could fulfill the prophecy of Jesus is just astronomical. And remember, that's just 8 prophecies. Just 8. Not several dozen, which is the low-end conservative count of the number of prophecies that he fulfilled. And not many hundreds. You take many hundreds, then you're just way off the charts, astronomical. And I think already, using the example that I gave you, that already highlights the impossibility, the frank impossibility of being able to just by happenstance fulfill all of the prophecies that Jesus did and will eventually, because there's some prophecies of him in the future when Christians believe he will return and fulfill several more. I think what we're left with is the conclusion that God is real. His name is Jesus. What he says is true. You see that on the video, and I believe this to be absolutely true. When you look at the odds of somebody being able to fulfill these prophecies between many hundreds to over 1,000 years before Jesus was born, and Jesus meets them exactly, how do you do that? Unless God is real, and his name is Jesus, and what he says is true. I hope you liked today's episode. I enjoyed putting this together. So make sure you come in next time for episode 5. We're going to talk about the other issue with the Big Bang Theory and how we were talking about things do not appear uncaused out of nothing. Turns out there's a little more controversy regarding that simple statement, and you might be surprised to see where that goes. So Hope you enjoyed. Make sure you like the video, comment below, share it with friends, subscribe to the channel. Get this out there. If you enjoyed this content, if it sparked your mind and got you thinking at the very least, maybe you didn't like or agree with everything I said, but it got you thinking and it got you considering. Talk about it with another friend, share it with them, and let me know what you think. I'd love to hear from you. Have a great night, everyone. God bless.